everybody and welcome back to my channel. This is Bumblecrafty. Today we're actually looking at a very special collaboration that I took part in with a number of amazing artists, a summer swap collaboration. You can see I've chosen to use a Jinifire doll. She's so beautiful with this lovely golden skin, and she's also got some fantastic scales on her body which will become very useful with the design I've got in mind. My partner is SilverGryphon and they sent me a great list of likes for me to work in, and one of the likes they had was history as well as looking at different kind of fantasy animals, but straight away I've latched onto this idea of creating a dinosaur inspired design, specifically Triceratops. So as part of the preparation, I've already removed the face paint using 100% acetone to remove any kind of paint or staining on the doll. I've also snipped off the hair as close to the scalp as I could in preparation for removing the hair plugs as well. I tried as carefully as I could to remove the head using my trusty hairdryer, however as you can see I accidentally snapped a net peg. I will have to come back and fix that later. I also add a little bit of 100% acetone into the head itself to try and loosen any glue, but as you can see the hair is actually coming out very well, probably the non-glue method that was used on this particular head. I find using these metal forceps much easier to use as they've got a rounded edge to them so that you can use them to scrape the inside of the head without risk of damage, which I have done plenty of times in the past. So the first thing we actually get on with is one of my favourite aspects of creating a new design, and it is adding the hair. I'm using this amazing curly Hair-Teeswater hair. It's so thick and fluffy already and I love the curls. It's exactly what I'm looking for the style of this particular doll. I want it to be big, bushy, behind the Triceratops frill, not hidden away at all, and the colours are so perfect for summer as well, as I want to go for an overall view of sunsets and sunrises. And the benefit is that it is already styled and ready to go. It is very thick so it fills the space in quite well, but I am having to pick out the specific curls, the specific lengths and the specific colours of the hank that I've been sent for the ones that I want to use. But once I've done that, I can start using my rerouting tool, which is a simple drill bit handle with a cut off tapestry needle that I'm using to reroute. I want it to be quite strong and quite large, so pushing the plugs into the original holes, but I've also got an additional sharp tool to make those plugs holes a little bit bigger, but also to add some additional ones if I need them. I've drawn a new line as I'm not going to be using the original hairline. That's where the frill is going to be around, and I want to leave a gap so that I can mess about with the frill. I'm also going to be using some Apoxie sculpt later on to add detail, so I want to keep the hair well away from that, and I can always put some extra in later. So first I'm going to start off with the hairline, and once I've gone all the way around, I'm just going to keep looking to see how often I need to put any additional plugs in, as again it is quite fluffy. Apologies for the lighting changes that happen throughout the video. Sometimes I'm working on this in the evening, sometimes the afternoon as well. Depending on the style of hair that I'm going for, I might not actually need to add too much hair to this, but as I'm going for that big hair style, I am going to now add additional plugs of hair into the central part, just swirling my way in, double checking as I go to see how much extra I need to add. This hair is actually quite thick, so as it goes in, you don't necessarily need to add any glue, because there's going to be no additional styling as well, so I'm not going to be pulling on the hair too much afterward. I'm really loving how these warm colours match against the gold of the body as well. She's already got a space where the existing design had a tail included, but as I wanted to make it articulated, this ended up being much simpler than I thought it would be. I drilled a hole straight across where the hips are, going through the existing space. So in the end, I wound around some flexible metal wire through the articulated material. I posted a large needle through the hole that I created in the hip, and then actually threaded the end of that needle with the flexible wire. It was so snug that once it had caught through the eye of the needle, I could pull the needle back through, and it actually brought the metal with it as well. I'll pull that really nice and tight, and I'll add some Apoxie Resin glue to add a little bit more strength. For the frill, I didn't really have as much a clear idea on how I was going to achieve this, but I had a good idea on how I wanted the final thing to look. In the end, I decided to use craft foam because I noticed that this is the kind of thing SilverGryphon used quite a lot in their own designs, so I wanted to incorporate that in mine as well. After a lot of fiddling around, I decided to place the metal wire into the head exactly where I wanted the horns to be, and then I placed a little bit of plastic around the hair just to offer a little bit of protection. Then created the foam shapes that are going to fit in between those metal sections. I debated a lot on how to actually attach these, but in the end I went for the two-part contact method with UHU Glue. Essentially, it means putting the glue on both items where you want them to attach, leaving them for the 10 minutes or so drying time, and then connecting them together, just holding them in place a few seconds. This made it a lot easier to ensure that they were exactly where I wanted them to be. It was really handy to be able to use this bookbinding tool to hold the foam in place from behind as well. And then it came time to work on the horns. Now I'm using my Apoxie Sculpt, which is a 2-part sculpting clay, getting 2 parts that are roughly the same sort of size and smushing them together until they're completely combined. I use this leftover tile as a base to make sure that the area is clean and nicely flat, and you can see that I've included 3 pins into the forehead and nose sections. This is so that I can make sure that when I'm putting the horns on, they are exactly where I want them to be. It gives the clay something to grip onto quite nicely, and in the inevitability of when I'm messing around with the head in the future or putting it back on the body and they decide that they're going to pop off, it's going to be much easier to stab them back in there and make sure they're secure. When it came to the horns on the frill itself, I just wanted to go over an initial pass to cover those wires and give a little bit of detail of ridging along the surface. I've used a crochet tool to help me make those ridges. It's a bit smoother because it's made of wood, and it's helped me to push down the clay onto the surface of the doll's head, making that transition a bit smoother. And then I'm going to do is leave this for 24 hours and come back and add further detail with another round of epoxy. So after 24 hours, the epoxy clay has gone nice and hard, and I can now go on with a second pass to add that extra detail. And this mostly consists of the transition points for the horns and adding much more detail onto the frill. I'm using this nail art tool so that I can actually create a bit of dimpling effect, which is the look I wanted to go for with the surface of the skin tone for the dinosaur. And this was a good opportunity as well to merge those frill horn points with the surface of the foam as well. And though I was really nervous, this is the most modification I've done like on the face specifically for a doll, I'm really happy with how the texture of the frill came out and how the horns look. So yeah, I'm really pleased with that. In creating the outer part of the tail, it's the only thing that I did purchase specifically for this project, and it's this gold fake leather material. It was absolutely perfect. I wanted something that would fold and would have all these creases, and it's got a real nice kind of leathery look when the tail moves. So I decided to add also some crushed velvet, which is already in my stock box for the base. And I've just created this really basic triangle initially because I'm going to be drawing the shape that I want on as I hold it against the doll, because I'm not actually sure what kind of pattern to do for this. So I'm just kind of holding it on the doll, drawing at the base where I want it to match the body, and then trying to pin it in place and sew as I go. Really useful having a miniature crochet hook when it comes time to turning things the right way around, and I'm really pleased with how this came out as well. Just double checking to make sure it fits onto the tail and is the right kind of length, and it is folding beautifully for how I expected it to go, so I'm really pleased with this specific kind of material. Here's a lots of fluff from previous project making hair wefts. It's always useful to keep hold of everything, and so I'm just first going to stuff it down into the end of the tail, and then come back to wrap it around the flexible section so that it doesn't all end up in one space in the tail when I actually attach it back together. I'm just making sure once I put it on, I'm just using this paintbrush to wiggle it down all into the correct spaces. You can see in this shot I've actually given the horns a once over with white paint to make it a bit easier when it comes to add colour, so it's got something pale to go on to instead of the darker shade that the epoxy sculpt actually dries as. I'm just going to making sure that I tuck in all the edges, and again I'm going to use UHU Glue, again first to glue down the small crushed velvet section at the bottom and then at the top, before tucking everything in and holding it around the sides as well. I just need to hold it in place for roughly 10 minutes. I'm just making sure everything's tucked in nice and neat. And it's come out a lot smoother than I had hoped it had. The creases are exactly how I wanted them to be, and it's really posable, so I'm super pleased with how this has come out as well. A really key feature for the look of the dinosaur, and when I imagined the idea, this was one of the aspects that I had come up really clearly. Now we come to one of the really fun parts, painting the horns. We come to a really fun part of the project where we're going to be painting the horns. I've already given the entire face and head 2 coats of MSC, letting that go off, and I just want to give a couple of coats to this initially, and then I'll come back and give it another coat when the face is ready as well. So I'm starting off with like a nice golden colour, and then starting at the top of the horns and working my way down, starting with an ochre and then just working my way through the colour palette all the way down to red. I really want it to be like a sunset, although I do appreciate it starts to look a bit more like candy corn initially. In the dislike column, my partner actually said that they didn't really like yellow too much, so I am trying to steer clear of that specific colour as much as possible. So I'm just going over and trying to get those initial bands in and then blending a little bit, but I will come back the next time and also do some additional colouring then. So throughout the painting process, as I was doing it, I was just not convinced about how I've done the horn on the nose. It felt as though it was more an alternative nose, like a big clown nose, and not specifically a horn. So I decided we would take that off now and actually fix it straight away. So as you can see, I've replaced it with a much more petite horn that looks more like a horn on the nose than extended from the nose itself, and I'm a lot happier with that. For the shoes, I knew I wanted to use a male doll shoes, and these are actually Nathan Rott ones. I wanted them to be big for a couple of reasons. One, I wanted them to be big like a dinosaur's feet. Also, I wanted them to be kind of outdoorsy style boots, as she's supposed to be a paleontologist, and I kind of want her to look a bit outdoorsy as well. The benefit of this is I've actually prepped them by stuffing some air dry clay down into the boot itself, the foam clay you can get, or cloud clay, and I've stuffed then the doll's foot in there and let it go off. It's easy then to pull out, and you've actually got something that's a bit more fitted to the doll's foot, and hopefully she'll be able to stand up as well. So I already prepped this as well by painting it white. I gave it a coat of MSC initially as well, just to help the plastic to grip onto the paint. Once I've done that, I've mixed together a green and a black and given it quite a quick couple of coats really, to make sure that they look quite outdoorsy, quite worn, quite like creased and folded. I also gave the rivets on the toe a brush of silver to make them stand out a little bit more. And then one of my favourite things was I did a little bit of glue around the edging and then put some sand on just to give it a little bit more texture. I've added these laces. I was initially just going to paint the laces that were already there, but I didn't really think they stood out enough, so I've actually threaded this material through, and I'll fix any kind of paint that flaked off during that process. And then I also crocheted these little loops to be the top sections of socks. I just crocheted those and then glued them onto the top so they look quite nice and cozy. definitely did want to do is to use these little dinosaur nail sticker art to like a little bit of a logo in the corner, but I also couldn't resist putting on a couple of hearts too. Whilst the t-shirt was very simple, the shorts were anything but very complicated. I actually had to go a couple different designs that I purchased online, but I just couldn't get them to work with the tail. So the first time I've ever done a tail that had to be fully incorporated into the outfit itself. Again, I'm using small clothing, and what I really like about this is it's really soft already, pre-worn, pre-washed, and I'm making use also of this pre-sewn edging that goes down the side, so they're going to be on either side of the shorts as well, so it's going to look very nice and very neat. I'm using what my nan used to refer to as a patchwork method, which basically means instead of having an actual fixed design, you generally know the shapes that you're looking for and you just continuously pin it into place, measure it up, have a look how it looks, sew little bits and snip little sections and keep going and going until you get the design that you're looking for. Obviously, if I had like a body form that I could be used that was monster high shape, that would make things much easier because I could maneuver it around much more easily. But the benefit is if I stick a pin in the doll, they're not going to get upset with me. I make a point of trying to turn up all the sections that I want beforehand because I've run into problems in the past where I've wanted to turn them up after I've done the seams, and that can end up looking really messy. Problem of how it was going to go above and below the tail, I decided to make a fake belt loop that then separated off kind of like a belt going round the back on either side. So this goes above the tail and has a little hook that hooks together, and then the shorts themselves raise up below the tail, and I actually incorporated some elastic and round in the waistband as well, just to cinch it into place. Not just to make it snug, but also because I wanted this look of big shorts cinched in around the waist. What is an outfit without a cute pair of pockets? I decided I wanted to have some side pockets on these cargo shorts, and so I'm just mocking up a real quick shape, so a triangle with a square edged bottom and just double folding over the top so they look just nice and neat like a folded over pocket. I'm only going to sew around the edges, so once they go on the shorts they'll be actually a nice working pocket. I've added on a bit of green detail here just to make them pop out a little bit more. The shirt, like the shorts, was a bit of a fiddle. I started with this gorgeous orange material, and I've used the thin pattern section for the sleeves and the more traditional cotton material for the main part. I pinned and sewed all the pieces together so that I would have some nice neat cuffs. Later I also added some extra elastic to help them stay snug around the wrist and in place. And while I wanted the shirt to be big and baggy, it ended up just a little too loose. So first I added some elastic around to the bottom seam, again to make it quite a bit more snug around the waist, and then some darts as well to help with that overall look and fit. I added this collar shape and the same thinner materials as the sleeves, as it was a bit better around the neck, but I am also using my trusty mini hair straighteners to help with this as well, making sure it's going to lay flat and in the shape that I wanted. I later added on some soft craft wire to the inside edge of the collar and also the left and right front sections of the shirt, so that when it sits on the doll it will help hold the shape that I wanted. I debated a bit between orange and blue buttons, but ended up going with a match on the colours, and also made this band that I mentioned before so the knot at the front would sit much better. You can also see where I've used an old bracelet of mine to thread into the belt loop sections and then sew into place to make a nice little colourful funky belt. So finally, after the weather let me add another layer of Mr Super Clear sealant, I was able to add a layer of paint to the frill and horns, giving it a lot more depth, blurring into different tones and colours more. And finally, it is face up time. I always get quite excited but also quite nervous. I knew pretty early on that I wanted blue eyes. I kept thinking about looking into the ocean and wanted those tones to be reflected in the colours that I chose. Normally I'd start the outlines with a colour much more similar to the skin tone, but I've gone in straight with pale blue. Once I have a general eye shape in place, I repeat this with the other eye, always quite a tricky undertaking. But I have the consolation of no eyebrows this time, something that I always really struggle with. I've also added in a fair amount of pearlescent powder. You do lose a lot of it whenever you then go back with the MSC, as it loses the sparkle, but sometimes if you add enough you will actually get a nice little bit of sparkling to the skin tone. So I like to add the darker shades to give a bit of depth to the face, but also I want to make quite a sun-kissed look with quite warmer oranges and also a few pinks as well. of the main reasons that I don't like using paints is I'm quite heavy-handed. Even with the tiniest of paintbrushes, I can never really hold my hand as still as I'd like to, and I always end up adding way too much paint, or I can never really get the shading and the depth that I'm looking for, and it ends up looking quite flat. The same for the lips. I wanted it to be quite powdery, quite light, and again, when I'm using paints, I tend to end up adding too much and spend a lot of time trying to remove it. Also, with this particular aesthetic, I wanted it to be quite a light look. And finally, I go back in with a few more whites and also pale blues in the whites of the eyes to create shading after another layer of MSC. Just the ever so important eye shines that really bring the doll to life, I think. I was debating doing eyelashes with this doll, but I do think there was something missing that they bring to the overall expression. I do have to hold my breath quite a bit and trust the process. I add a bit of white also in between to make them pop with highlights, and we're almost there. And my favourite ever tip from Stychwick Witch was actually using UV resin on the eyes instead of gloss. This is an absolute lifesaver and really gives that high shine. A bit of poofing up over the hair and she is done. Time to get dressed. So for the accessories, I made a couple of little bracelets, and I also made this little tray that I've coated with sand, included some additional sand in there, and there's some surprises for excavation that they can use this little brush to do. I thought it would be nice to make a little journal. I know that SilverGryphon likes to do bookbinding, so I thought it would be a cute little addition. And what day in the sun is complete without a nice strawberry ice bubble tea, so I had to make a little one of those for her. She also has a little ID badge that I made with her own picture, and it's a little working clip, which might be one of my favourite things. There is also an additional notebook and pencil, which fits nicely into this cute little backpack I made out of patterned fake leather. It's also got some magnets built in, so it'll be able to actually close quite nicely and neatly, and I'm pleased with how the backpack turned out. So I've got to pack her all up and get her ready to send off to her new home, and I just hope that SilverGryphon enjoys opening the doll, and I hope it meets all their expectations. But before I say a final goodbye to this doll, I've got a lovely opportunity to take some sunshiny pics in the garden. I go immediately. I can't wait to see what Stychwick Witch has got in store for me. She sent me this amazing card, just telling me a little bit about the doll, which is really nice. You see me pause so many times. I'm just so nervous and so excited to actually see what the doll is, and I'm just completely blown away. There's so much detail on the face. The hair is beautiful, the detail, the patchwork is so cute. There's so many different things that have been added in here by Stitch. I'm so unbelievably grateful. There's so many little things in here that I'll have a look at in more detail a bit later on and have fun using with future projects, but just to have a look at her. These beautiful flowers, these tiny little horns, tiny little butterflies. I noticed her ears have got fluff behind them, beautiful earrings. She's just so adorable. You can't hear my happy, excited squeals going on when I was filming this. She even has these amazing little hooves and fluffy legs. She's so beautiful. And here we can see, actually, I realised that there was actually a picture drawn inside the card as well. Stychwick is so talented. She's beautiful. And I just can't wait to take her outside and take a few photographs in the garden. I think we can all agree she looks absolutely fantastic sitting out in the sunshine. Stychwick Witch has done an amazing job. And here we have all the other collaborators. We've got Stychwick Witch, Nelumbo Dolls, SilverGryphon, Rainstorm Creations, and my own doll as well. Please head over to see everyone's videos and check them out on their channels, and thank you so much for watching.